What's your definition of science?
Well, if I look at the standard definition of science, which is it's very much about knowledge, and it's very much about proof behind that knowledge. When I looked at the Latin roots of the word science, some of you may know that the SCI bit at the beginning, it is something that is the beginning of a lot of words. Often they're to do with words that are to do with cutting, like, an incisor or scissors or something like that, right? And the iant bit at the end is to do with knowledge. It's to do with awareness or, intelligence. So when you're looking at science, what you're really looking at is something that cuts up knowledge. It cuts up experience. And by cutting it up, it's possible to see what it's made of. Now, that's not the exact etymological definition of what science is. But when I first came across and looked at science as something that enables me to get knowledge of the world in pieces that can be joined up and be used to make sense of things, that's how I always started to look at science. That's for me how it worked for me.
Okay, and you mentioned the word proof, or something came up, because that's the other bit that I think is interesting.
Yeah, but often when people talk about science or research, the word they're more likely to use is that it's evidence-based.
Yes.
But evidence is one kind of proof. Probably a better word to use is empirical, as opposed to evidence-based, because empirical includes proof, which is not just hard and measurable through numbers and instruments and things like that. It's not just visible and tangible. That a lot of that is very evidence-based, and also mathematics behind that too. The other two kinds of proof that are really critical, I think, are experience. Some people have an experience of something, and even though there's no physical evidence of it, for them it's real. For them it's proof that something is real. So a person's experience can be considered proof, at least to that person, if not anybody else. And the third kind of proof, which is really important, is actually to do with education. So the three kinds of proof are evidence, experience, and education.
How is education proof?
Well, education, many of you may be familiar with the idea of a mathematical proof, for example.
Right.
There's a formula, there's an idea, there's a concept, and it holds water, and it's been tested in terms of logic or in terms of maths or things like that. And it's considered as a proof. Like an example is Einstein's theory of relativity. When he came up with it, there was no proof for it, in the world in terms of evidence, let alone experience. And it took a solar eclipse to demonstrate that light bent around the sun courtesy of gravity, which is one of the things that was predicted from his theory mathematically. So the mathematical proof was absolutely solid, despite the fact that there wasn't any physical evidence or experience of it. And then one day people gathered the evidence to show there was alignment to that mathematical proof. So if there's a competency or a knowledge base or an underlying philosophy that holds water, it can be tested. It can be checked to see if it works or it doesn't intuitively or logically. So these three kinds of proof, evidence, experience, and education, are critical. And if you can find something which allows you to get all three kinds of proof for something, that is the most valid kind of empirical persuasion that you can give people. Some people are quite happy with the evidence, even though there's no experience or model for it. Other people are very happy just with the experience, even if there's no evidence. And others are just happy with a little proof or a model, even if there's no experience or evidence. But you can always sell something to somebody if you provide all three kinds of proof.